At some point or another, every D&D character experiences their first strange, cryptic dream. This may happen sooner or later, or with varying frequency, depending on the nature of the campaign and the activities of the character, but few campaigns go by without at least one. This is the dream experienced by my Goliath barbarian monk, Dr. Horus Vinberger, the same character who appears in my Duskvale series if you've seen that. This story takes place well after that one, after I decided to multiclass out of Barbarian and into Monk. Weird multiclass, I know, but it made sense because we'd in-game flavored Vinberger's rage as more of an icy analytic focus rather than a burning inferno of anger. Anyway, I don't remember quite what level we were at when this story took place, but I was at least a few levels into Monk because I was really starting to get into the meat of the class. And that's when Vinberger went to sleep one night and opened his eyes somewhere else. And this was not particularly unusual for the party, since we had one character who went to sleep and had his consciousness transferred to a clone of himself in hell every night, but this was the first time it had happened to Vinberger. The Goliath opens his eyes and looks around, finding himself in an unfamiliar courtyard, almost like a castle's, but laid out in a manner more akin to a monastery, like a yard put aside for prayer and meditation. The high stone walls are topped with black spikes, and racks of weapons lie all around, holding hundreds, no, thousands, of strange armaments of a sort that Vinberger has never seen before. A light fog hovers all around. He then hears the soft impact of wood on stone behind him. Wheeling about, Vinberger sees a man with a walking stave approaching him. He has gray, ashy skin, with long black hair that spills over his face. Vinberger immediately recognizes the man as a fallen Aasimar, although one who has, perhaps, strayed even further from his celestial lineage than most. "You, sir, where am I?" Vinberger asks. But the other man doesn't respond, stopping barely a pace away. He spins his staff in his hands and sweeps it towards Vinberger's face, the Goliath just managing to dodge the blow. He takes a step back, getting out of range, but the man doesn't move in for a second attack. He then looks Vinberger up and down, as if appraising him, before saying in an old, deep voice, "You are a disgrace." "Oh, I'm sorry. And, if I may ask, who are you to make such a judgment?" The old man responds with contempt. "I am an old force, far more ancient than what your puny mortal mind can realize. I was the first man to open up my eyes beyond the arcanum that was magic, for I established and taught the ways of Ki for so many years, learned it without any guidance, and yet you gallivant around, using it in such a pitiful, meaningless way, with no change to your life, no change to your being, using it as if it's solely a weapon. You are a disgrace." As the man repeats his insult, Vinberger finds himself recovered from the initial confusion he'd felt at this strange, unprovoked, and yet strangely petty attack. Nonetheless, he feels a need to defend himself as someone who specifically doesn't view Ki that way. "I never saw it as solely a weapon, sir. It's merely a weapon because that is the dark situation our world finds itself in. When I first channeled the inner focus and energy of Ki, it was always with the intent to apply it through my abilities as a physician, to help heal the sick. Unfortunately, I haven't had much chance to do so." "Your Ki is a poison, not to your foes' minds, but to your own." He spits at Vinberger's feet and the Goliath wakes up. Back in the real world, Vinberger sits up, blinks, and spends a moment trying to parse what just happened, before he shakes his head and goes back to sleep. Vinberger never told anyone what he dreamed that night, not even the other members of the party. Not because he felt the need to keep it secret, but because it was such a strange, random incident. He didn't even feel insulted, he was just confused. But of course, the truth came out later, when the party finally met the old monk in the real world. Or so you'd think, because that's the best part of this story. No one ever sees this guy again. He doesn't appear in the real world, he's never mentioned, and no one has any more dreams about him. he just disappears from the campaign, and we never see him again. I actually completely forgot about it until the final session, when the DM was taking unanswered questions we had about the campaign. I suddenly remembered the strange dream. I look at the dungeon master. Hey, you remember that time when Vinberger was asleep and that random monk walked up and called me a disgrace? What was all that about? Because he never showed up again. Oh yeah, the DM responds. Yeah, he was part of something I was gonna do, but then I changed my mind. So, what happened then in canon? It was just a strange dream? Because that's what Vinberger thinks it was, since it never recurred or became relevant to anything. The DM considers for a moment. Yeah, pretty much. Just had a dream. Just a weird dream. And somehow that was my favorite explanation he could have possibly given for the whole incongruous event. That was the only dream that Vinberger ever had narrated in that campaign, and it turned out to be just a dream. While in the midst of this grand world-saving adventure, he just had a random dream that some old monk walked up to him and did the fantasy equivalent of flaming him on Reddit, and there was no deeper significance to it whatsoever. And that's the whole story.